Hello, folks, and welcome out to the Single Player Podcast. I'm your one and only host, I'm 16-Bit, and I got a good show for you this week. We're going to be going over the Sony News Roundup, as well as talking about Shigeru Miyamoto being honored, and Blizzcon 2019. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and we'll be right back after this. All right, folks, and we're back, and we've got a lot of Sony news to cover. First and foremost, Death Stranding is coming to PC in 2020. That's right, Kojima Productions confirmed that the game will be released on PC by summer 2020. And of course, Sony fanboys are now on suicide watch. It's one of those games that a lot of the fanboys kept touting as like one of the major exclusives for the PS4. And it seems like they're actually losing one of their exclusive. But it's like, what did you expect? The game was always meant to be a timed exclusive. I mean, Kojima had actually confirmed it several times that the game would be a timed exclusive on the PS4 and would eventually come to other platforms. So I find it hilarious how they're freaking out about this. Of course, this ain't the first time they freaked out about something like this. I remember back in, I think it was like, late 2008 with Final Fantasy 13. Oh boy. For those who don't know, in 2006, Final Fantasy 13 was announced as a exclusive for the PS3. And it was like that for basically 2 years until 2008, I think, when Square announced that the game would be a multi-platform release for the PS3 and the 360, and the Sony fanboys freaked out. And it was actually kind of funny at the time. Of course, everyone, including myself, had to remind them that, well, Final Fantasy was never a Sony exclusive and that the first 6 games were released on a Nintendo platform, but, they didn't want to listen at the time. So I kind of find it hilarious how they're freaking out again over this, but still, what did you expect? They basically paid for timed exclusivity. That was it, okay? So, and even then, why should you even care? I mean, the game looks like a massive walking simulator that I honestly don't think is going to sell very well, but I could be wrong on that. So, anyway, next up, it seems that Sony has trademarked the next few generations of PlayStation systems. That's right. It came out this past week that Sony has already filed trademarks for PlayStation 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Damn, Sony's really thinking of the future. Now, I've seen a lot of speculation about this. Some say that this actually is planning the next generation of PlayStation consoles, but I've seen others claiming that they're just doing this so that no one else can make PlayStation 6 through 10 because supposedly PlayStation 5 will be their last system before they become a streaming service. I highly doubt that because I've heard that said before regarding the PS4. Like before that came out, you had all these people saying, oh my God, it's going to be Sony's last system. That'll be it before they go into a streaming service. And we're 6 years into the PS4 and well, it hasn't happened yet. So I honestly doubt that'll happen again. Or if it does happen, it won't happen for a long time. Though what's what's interesting is that they're going up to PS10, which I'm fairly certain we'll all be in nursing homes by the time we get up there. So, oh God, can you imagine that? Like gamers and weebs as elderly people in nursing homes? My God, we'll just be sitting around playing Smash Brothers on our ancient Switches while arguing as to who is the best girl. But anyway, now that I think about it, I remember there was an ad for the PS2 for the PlayStation 9, and it was like this weird commercial where the guy has a ball that says PS9. He opens it up and these little like nano machines fly out and go up into his nose, and then next thing you know, he's imagining, it like gives him like all these hallucinations or whatever, where he imagines himself fighting against people and swimming and all this kind of stuff. It was weird. It was a very strange advertisement, but of course it was for the PS2. What do you expect? The PS2 had some really weird ads, like not like PS3 level weird, but we're talking like, if you ever seen the David Lynch ad for PS2, like that was some weird shit. So, and lastly, on our Sony news roundup, it seems that the PS4 has hit 102.8 million units, which means that it has officially outsold the PS1 and the Nintendo Wii. Now, most people expected it to do so, but here's the thing. Keep in mind that's units shipped, not actually sold. Sony has a tendency to do this. They'll count how many units have actually been shipped, but they won't reveal the true amount that have actually been sold until much later on. So possibly that the number is actually a little lower, but still, to actually be the second best-selling console of all time is quite a major feat. I mean, actually hitting 100 million units is something that very few consoles have actually ever done. Of course, this means that the PS4 is only 53 million units away from outselling the PS2, and I highly doubt it will ever do that, especially with the PS5 coming out in a year from now. There's also the fact that PS4 sales are slowing down. Originally, Sony's projected that they would sell about 15 million units by the end of 2019. However, it seems they've lowered that to 13.5. But of course, as I mentioned before, this is only the third Sony system to hit 100 million units. The only one that hasn't, of course, is the PS3, which is stuck at 87 million, and that's entirely because the console was a failure in its first 3 years. Of course, that's what'll happen when you sell a console for $600 and then with very little games, and then go and tell everyone that if they want to afford it, then they better get a second job. So anyway, folks, I'm going to take a short break and we'll be right back after this. All right, folks, and we're back. And this next topic is actually really nice. It came out this past week that Shigeru Miyamoto is going to be honored as a person of cultural merit, which is one of the highest honors anyone in a creative field can actually obtain. In fact, Miyamoto is the first game developer to ever actually obtain it. And honestly, the man deserves it, not just simply for making some of the greatest games of all time, but for his advancements in game development. Miyamoto has quite an interesting history. He was born in 1952 in the town of Sonobo, just outside of Kyoto, and he graduated from the Kanazawa Municipal College of Industrial Arts. In fact, he got his job at Nintendo because his father had a mutual friend who worked there, and they were looking for an industrial artist, so they set up an interview and he instantly got the job. But what's interesting is that he didn't want to be a game developer. Instead, he wanted to be a manga artist. He didn't start getting into game development until around 1978-79 when he first played Space Invaders, and that's what got him interested in game development. So imagine that. Imagine if Shigeru Miyamoto hadn't actually played Space Invaders and he continued on being a manga artist. Gaming would probably be a very different thing than it is today. Donkey Kong definitely wouldn't exist, and neither would Mario or Legend of Zelda. Anyway, I was thinking about other game developers who deserve the honor as well, and the first one that came up was, of course, Yuji Horii. And for those who don't know who he is, he's basically the creator of Dragon Quest, and essentially popularizing RPGs in Japan. Like, no joke, before Dragon Quest, RPGs weren't really that popular, mostly because they were very complex for a lot of people to get into. And then Dragon Quest came out, and because of how easy it was to jump into, it became incredibly popular, and then suddenly every game developer tried ripping it off. No joke, Dragon Quest is the reason why Final Fantasy exists. The story goes that Squaresoft was going through a lot of financial difficulties and they were about to shut down, and then they saw the success of Dragon Quest, said, hey, why don't we just sort of make our own version of that? And they did, and the rest is history. Almost the same thing with Phantasy Star as well. In fact, I'm fairly certain that you can trace the lineage of every JRPG back to Dragon Quest, and if you ask any RPG developer, they'll tell you that they were inspired by one of the Dragon Quest games. Another person who I think deserves the honor is Yu Suzuki. The man basically pioneered arcades in the 80s and the 90s, and he created Virtua Fighter, basically the first 3D fighting game. Of course, probably his most famous creation is Shenmue, which pioneered open world sandbox games and also created QuickTime events. But anyway, I'd like to congratulate Shigeru Miyamoto on receiving such an honor, because he definitely deserves it for giving everyone awesome childhoods. Speaking of Nintendo, it came out this past week that the Nintendo Switch has officially hit 41.8 million units in lifetime sales, which is actually pretty damn impressive, especially when you consider the fact that the console is only 2.5 years into its lifespan. In fact, what's interesting is that it's actually outsold the Wii U, the GameCube, and the N64, and is actually 8 million away from outselling the Super Nintendo. So it's pretty impressive and also kind of refreshing, especially when you consider just how much of a failure the Wii U really was. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the system. It's a fantastic little console, but unfortunately it failed to reach the sales expectations of its predecessor and really put the company in a bad financial position. In fact, I remember in 2013, Satoru Iwata had to take a pay cut because the company wasn't really doing very well, and it was either he take a pay cut or he starts laying off people. And he was like, look, if I start laying off people, the morale in the company will go down, and so will the quality of the products. So I'd rather just take a pay cut. And I remember a lot of people like really applauding him for that, including myself. I mean, that was something you didn't really see many companies do. For the most part, they were just laying off people. So it's great to see that Nintendo got themselves out of that rut and the Switch is doing so well. In fact, I just remembered something. It came out a few weeks ago that the sales in the United States has hit already 15 million. Now, it still has about 3 million to go if it wants to outsell the N64, but I think it'll definitely make it there, especially with Pokemon Sword and Shield coming out, as well as Animal Crossing and a whole bunch of other stuff. And last but not least, it seems that Ubisoft has confirmed that several games will be getting delayed, including Gods and Monsters, Watch Dogs Legion, and Rainbow Six Quarantine. However, there's a reason for this, because on top of launching on the PS4 and the Xbox One, they will also be launching on the PS5 and the Xbox Scarlet. The news was confirmed by Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot, who said, and I quote, "The 5 titles, yes, they will be on this generation and the next generation, and they will take full advantage of all the new features that are coming with the machine, which are actually going to be extremely interesting for players. You will be able to download new content a lot faster. Players will experience better frame rates. There are a lot of very good elements that will come with these new machines. So the delay basically means that both games won't be coming out till holiday 2020, since that's when both consoles will be releasing. And I find that very interesting because this isn't new for Ubisoft. They did it with the original Watch Dogs, actually. The first game came out for the PS3 and the 360 the same day as the PS4 and the Xbox One version. So I think we're going to see that a lot in the next few years. A lot of games coming out for both the PS4 and the Xbox One the same day as the PS5 and the Scarlet. Actually, now that I think about it, it's not even going to be called the Scarlet. It's probably going to be called something else. So anyway, folks, I'm going to take a short break and we'll be right back after this. All right, folks, and we're back. And now we got to talk about Blizzard, because this past week was, of course, Blizzcon, and there was quite of interesting things leading up to this. There was a lot of speculation because Blizzard had canceled several events. They canceled the Switch Overwatch launch at the Nintendo World Store in New York. They had canceled the WoW 15th anniversary celebration in Taiwan. And so there was a lot of speculation as to how Blizzard was going to handle everything at BlizzCon. There was some speculation that they may have a last-minute cancellation. There was speculation that they would be banning protesters. Well, it turns out that that didn't actually happen. In fact, Blizzard allowed protesters, and this was great. You had people going into BlizzCon dressed up as Winnie the Pooh and holding up signs saying "Free Hong Kong." That is great. I love that. Seeing people dress up as Winnie the Pooh is that's top-notch. I think there was also a few people cosplaying as May, because that was another thing. People were worried that they would ban Mei cosplay, and apparently they didn't. Now, I'm not sure if there's any Mei Free Hong Kong cosplay, but if there was, that would be pretty epic. Of course, what was pretty funny was at the World of Warcraft Q&A panel, you had people lining up not to ask questions, but to instead make the statement of Free Hong Kong, revolution of our time, which I'm like, that, bravo, you absolute mad lads, you actually friggin' did it. That's awesome. But what was interesting was that apparently Blizzard president J. Allen Brack put out an apology. You were not going to believe this shit. He said, and I quote, "We moved too quickly in our decision making, and then to make matters worse, we were too slow to talk with all of you. We didn't live up to the high standards we set for ourselves." Oh yes, I'm so certain that you were so apologetic about how you treated people. You're so apologetic that you absolutely refused to unban the casters from the Blitzchung incident. Yeah, apparently Blizzard outright is refusing to unban the casters from the game, even though they didn't do anything wrong. Like when Blitzchung said what he said, they hid their heads behind their laptop monitors because they were afraid they were going to get in trouble. Unfortunately, they did, even though they didn't say anything. They didn't ask him to say it. Their reaction was basically like oh shit. Like they had nothing to do with it, and yet they're still banned from it. I think that's complete bullshit. But anyway, I digress. Apparently, they've also announced a whole bunch of other stuff. They announced World of Warcraft Shadowlands expansion. Too bad I don't really care about WoW. I'm going to be quite frank. I played WoW for a little bit, and honestly, it kind of bored me, and I moved on to other games. I think that's just me with MMOs. I play them for like a short while, and then I just get bored, and I move on to other stuff. So in fact, I was actually interested in trying out WoW Classic, but then they pulled all this shit, and I'm like, okay, no, fuck you people. If that's how you're gonna act, then no, I'm not gonna support your crap anymore. And I can't, because I have my battle.net account completely deleted. I requested a deletion, and yeah, it's gone now. And I don't feel bad about it. I'm not like, oh my God, my battle.net account. Like, I barely even used it. So there was no need for me to even have one in the first place. Heck, I was also interested in getting Warcraft 3 Reforged, because that one looked cool, because Warcraft 3 is friggin' awesome. That was one of my favorites. Nope, they pulled this crap, so I'm not going to deal with it. But what was also interesting is they announced Diablo 4. Now, I guarantee you, this is basically their apology for that Diablo Immortal debacle from last year, and that was some bullshit. Oh my God, I remember that whole thing with the don't you guys have any phones? Yeah. And so I guess that this is their apology for that. And I'm not going to lie now. The game looks good. It looks like a return to form for the series. It looks like more of a return to Diablo 2. However, it seems that there's a catch to the game. You see, it doesn't have an offline mode. That's right. It requires a constant internet connection. You'd think Blizzard would learn after the disaster that was the Diablo 3 launch, but apparently, nope, they didn't learn anything. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, when Diablo 3 first launched, it had a auction house where you could buy items using either in-game gold or real money. And it required an constant internet connection. So when the game launched, the servers were completely backed up and no one could get into the game, and people were pissed about it. Eventually, Blizzard had no choice but to completely remove the auction house. And it was a good idea. It was a good idea on them, but the fact that they even put it in there in the first place, it was a terrible mistake. They should have never done that. And apparently they're making the exact same mistake again, though this time it's not because of an auction house, it's because of basically they're making it into an MMO. And lastly, we've got Overwatch 2. Now, the game was actually leaked before BlizzCon, but now it's been officially confirmed. And while it's basically more of the same, it does have some interesting features between the first and second game. Most notably, you will be able to carry over your skins and player icons to the new game. On top of that, players in both games will actually be able to play against each other. So that's actually an interesting feature. But still, I have no interest in it because, like I said before, 4. I played it on a free weekend once, and it did nothing for me. It felt more like a prettier version of Team Fortress 2. What's interesting about both games is that neither game has a set release date. The Diablo 4 trailer mentioned nothing about a release, and apparently Jeff Kaplan was interviewed by PC Gamer when they asked him about Overwatch 2's launch. He said he has no idea when. As usual, that's par for the course for Blizzard. They do that quite a lot. They'll announce the game and then they won't release it for years. They did that with StarCraft 2. That game was announced back in 2007, but it didn't get a release until 2010. So expect the exact same thing to happen with Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4. Anyway, folks, I'm going to take a short break and we'll be right back after this. Anyway, folks, that's it for this week. I want to thank you all for listening. Remember, you can listen to the show on YouTube and BitChute and follow me on Twitter and Gab. Links are below. So anyway, I'll see you all next week. And remember that video games will never die.